It's never easy, Clara, never. Mama said you'd be here always.
Summer drizzle slicks the station plaza. Evan Cross, a blue-eyed tech CEO, lays flowers for his sister. A whisper stops him. "Mom, please don't leave me." A 7-year-old curls by the memorial, clutching a doll, a brass sun on a string. Evan kneels, offers soup at a diner in view of the station. Then, a beer-stale man bursts in to claim her. Will Evan step in before she's lost again? Warm air settles over the Central Station Plaza, and a light drizzle turns the pavers dark and slick. The sodium lamps hum, casting a soft orange glow that makes everything look a little older, a little sadder. The memorial wall rises from the center like a quiet witness. Names are carved in long, even columns. People pass, reading for a moment, then moving on. A 7-year-old girl sits curled at the base of the wall, knees hugged to her chest. Sneakers soaked through. She holds a worn cloth doll by one loose arm. The doll's yarn hair is matted from the rain. The girl presses her face to its stitched cheek and stays very still, as if stillness could hide her. Across the plaza, a bus hisses to a stop and exhales. Somewhere, a violinist plays a slow phrase that never quite becomes a song. The notes float, drift, and fade. A couple argues softly under an umbrella. An old man in a baseball cap sets a plastic candle by the names and tips the brim, as if saluting friends. He glances at the child, then away. People always have places to be. The girl's eyes are swollen, the skin around them pink from rubbing. She keeps blinking, like she's trying to hold back a tide. Her lips are chapped. She clears her throat and tests her voice in a whisper the rain almost swallows. "It's okay." You wait right here," her words tremble. She squeezes the doll tighter. The wall glistens. Water beads in the engraved letters and runs in the thin lines like the names are weeping. The girl traces one groove with a fingertip, not reading, just following the curve of a letter because it gives her something to do. Her hand is small and nicked, a few shallow splits, the kind you get from opening a door too fast, from gripping a railing too long, from holding on. A pendant rests against her collarbone. A small circle of brass, hand-etched with a sun, hung on a dark shoelace cord. It gleams when the light hits it and disappears when the drizzle dulls it again. She twists it when a burst of laughter comes too close. A group of teenagers cuts across the plaza, hoodies up, skateboards under arms. One boy slows, stares, then catches up with the rest. The girl breathes out. The announcement board chirps. Track numbers flip. A recorded voice apologizes for delays and thanks everyone for their patience. The girl raises her head, listening hard, like there could be a clue inside the vowels. She pulls a folded flyer from her pocket. It's damp and soft at the corners. She smooths it on her knee. A map of stations. A small star marks the plaza. She points to it with the doll's tiny cloth hand as if the doll might understand directions better than she does. On the far side, the 24-hour diner throws gold light through its windows. A waitress carries a tray stacked with mugs. Steam rises. Coffee and grilled onions push against the door each time it opens. The girl watches the door swing and shut, hypnotized by the rhythm. The smell is warm. The plaza is not. A security guard stands beneath the overhang near the rideshare zone. He scrolls his phone. He's young and tired, shoulders slumped, cap crooked. A radio crackles at his hip. He glances up when a taxi honks, then looks back down. Maybe he doesn't see her. Maybe he thinks someone else will. The girl tucks the doll into the crook of her elbow, as if making the doll smaller could make this night shorter. Rain gathers along the hem of her shorts and drips, drip, drip, pooling in the shallow line of the memorial base. A sparrow hops close, tilts its head, and darts away. The girl touches the brass sun again. She takes a breath that feels too big for her ribs. "I'm here," she whispers to the names. "I'm trying to be brave." A wind slides through the corridor between the station and the shops, bending the flowers in a vase someone left. The lilies sway, their scent sharp and clean against the wet concrete. The girl watches a petal loosen and fall, a slow white curve to the ground. She thinks about counting seconds, but she keeps losing the numbers. Footsteps cross the plaza. Not fast, not careless, steady, the kind that do not rush when it rains. The girl tenses, then lowers her head, chin to chest, cheek to doll. The footsteps pass, then circle back, then pause near the edge of the memorial's light. A shadow settles over the slick pavers, long and quiet, like someone deciding whether to step closer. The girl doesn't look up. She presses the brass sun to her palm until it leaves a print, and she waits. Rain still whispers across the plaza, soft as breath against stone. The footsteps draw nearer, deliberate but unthreatening, until a tall figure stops just a few feet away. The sound of an umbrella snapping shut breaks the stillness. Water slides from its edge and spatters onto the ground. Evan Cross stands under the dim sodium light, the reflection of the memorial flickering across his polished shoes. In the hush, the drizzle clings to his tailored Italian suit, darkening the fabric at the shoulders. He doesn't flinch. His expression is composed, almost serene, but there's a heaviness in his eyes, piercing blue, thoughtful, as though he's somewhere between remembering and forgetting. He carries a small bouquet of lilies, white, bound by a plain green ribbon. His hand tightens around them briefly before he kneels, resting them beneath a carved name near the center of the wall. Clara Cross, his sister. The years haven't dulled the ache. He still remembers the day he promised he'd always protect her, and the day he failed. The girl stirs at the sound of paper crinkling as he adjusts the ribbon. Evan notices her now. Tiny frame, soaked sneakers, the faint trembling of her shoulders. For a moment he assumes she's waiting for a train, maybe her parents are nearby. But the longer he watches, the more he feels that quiet, unspoken wrongness, the kind of silence no child should sit inside. He clears his throat gently, not to startle her. "Hey," he says softly, "you okay out here?" The girl doesn't look up. She tightens her grip on the doll, mumbling something he can't quite catch. He shifts, lowering to one knee to meet her level. "It's late. Your family around?" No answer, just a small shake of her head. Then he hears it, so faint he almost misses it. "Mom, please don't leave me." The words slip out of her like a memory, and something inside Evan breaks open. The same phrase, those exact words, were the last he heard from his sister before her car disappeared in the flood 10 years ago. The echo crashes through him like a wave. He steadies his breath. "Hey," he says again, voice gentler now. "I'm Evan. What's your name?" The girl glances up, eyes rimmed red, lashes wet. "Sophie," she whispers. "Hi, Sophie," he says, offering a small smile. "That's a beautiful name." She blinks, uncertain whether to believe his calm tone. Rain traces the side of her cheek. He notices the brass pendant glinting faintly at her collarbone. "Are you waiting for someone?" he asks. "My mom," she says. She said she'd come back, but she didn't. Evan glances toward the station doors, only strangers passing through. The night feels heavier now. "Would you like to wait somewhere dry? There's a diner right across the street." He nods toward the glow of its neon sign. "We can sit where you can still see the station." She hesitates. "I can't go far." "You won't," he promises. "We'll stay in sight of the wall." Her small fingers clutch the doll tighter. "You promise you won't take me away?" His voice steadies, low and sincere. "I promise, Sophie." He stands, extends his hand, but not too close. "There's soup and grilled cheese inside. You look like you could use something warm." Sophie studies him for a long second, the way children test the truth in an adult's eyes. She sees the reflection of the diner's light on his glasses, the rain softening his serious face. Finally, she nods, still clutching her doll. They cross together under the drizzle, Evan adjusting his stride to match her small steps. At the curb, he opens the door and holds it for her. The warm air spills out. Coffee, butter, a low hum of old music. Inside, a booth near the window waits like a small golden island. Evan gestures for her to slide in first. She does, keeping her doll between them like a shield. He signals to the waitress. "Hot soup and grilled cheese, please, and some cocoa, if you've got it." When the woman leaves, he looks back to Sophie. "Better?" She nods once, her voice almost a whisper. "Thank you." He smiles faintly. "You're welcome." Then, beneath the amber diner light, he notices her hands. Tiny cuts, old bruises, grime under the nails. He reaches for the napkin dispenser, thinking. Something about this child's stillness feels too practiced, like she's been waiting in fear longer than anyone should. He doesn't ask yet. He just sits there in silence as the waitress sets down the soup. The smell of tomato and melted cheese fills the air. Outside, rain keeps tapping against the window. Inside, the world feels a little smaller, a little safer, but neither of them knows. The night is far from over. The diner hums softly, the sound of a late-night radio drifting between clinking silverware and murmured conversations. A coffee machine hisses in the background. The window glass fogs faintly, blurring the rain and streetlights outside. Evan sits across from Sophie, watching her small hands wrap around the cocoa mug. The warmth has brought a hint of color back to her cheeks. She sips slowly, careful not to spill. "Good?" he asks. She nods, barely lifting her eyes. "It's sweet." He smiles, relieved to hear her voice steady. "That's the point." She tries a bite of grilled cheese, chews thoughtfully. For a while, silence feels right, gentle, safe. The kind of silence people need after fear. When she finishes half the sandwich, Evan excuses himself for a moment, walks to the counter, and asks the waitress quietly, "You've got a first aid kit? The kid's got some scrapes." "Sure thing, hun," the woman says, pulling a small tin box from under the register. She hands it to him with a knowing look. "Sweet of you to help her." Evan nods, thanks her, and returns to the booth. Sophie stiffens when she sees the kit. "I'm okay," she murmurs. "I know," he says gently. "Just thought we could clean up those little cuts. Don't want them to sting later." He waits until she gives a small nod. Then, slowly, he opens the tin. No sudden moves, no pressure. The air smells faintly of antiseptic. He tears a wipe and dabs carefully at her palms. She winces once, but doesn't pull away. "You're pretty brave," he says quietly. "My mom says brave means don't cry," Sophie replies. Evan's throat tightens. "Your mom sounds wise." "She's nice," Sophie adds. "She works a lot, cleans offices at night." Her tone carries a fragile pride. Evan feels the ache in her words, the way a child's love covers worry. He finishes taping the small bandage, then sets the kit aside. "There," he says softly, "looks good as new." She looks at him for the first time, really looks, at the dark hair, the glasses, the crisp shirt damp at the cuffs. "You're not a policeman," she says. Half question, half observation. He chuckles. "No, not a policeman." Then, "Why are you here?" The question lands heavier than she means it to. He glances toward the window. The memorial wall is just visible through the rain, white lilies glinting under the lamps. "I was visiting someone I lost," he answers. "My sister." Sophie's voice softens. "She died?" He nods once. "A long time ago." "I'm sorry," she whispers. "Thanks," he says, managing a small smile. "You remind me of her a little. She used to talk about the stars and how they don't go away, even when we can't see them." Sophie looks down at her pendant, the small brass sun glinting against her throat. She touches it gently. "My mom says if I get lost, follow the sun." Evan blinks. "Follow the sun?" She nods. She made this. She said, "Even when it's dark, I can still find my way if I remember the light." He leans closer, fascinated. The hand-etched sun looks almost identical to one his own mother used to draw in the corners of his notebooks as a boy, a simple circle with uneven rays, one longer than the rest. He hasn't thought about it in years, but the memory floods back, her voice saying, "Keep going, Evan." Even light hides sometimes. He exhales slowly. "That's a very special pendant." "She said it's magic," Sophie says, smiling for the first time. "Only works if you're brave." Her innocence pulls at something deep inside him. He finds himself wanting to protect that spark, to make sure it doesn't fade. Outside, the rain softens into mist. A bus rumbles by, tires hissing. Somewhere in the kitchen, a bell rings for an order ready to serve. Evan checks his watch. Almost midnight. He debates calling the police, a shelter, someone, but fears breaking the fragile trust between them. "So, Sophie," he says gently, "do you know where your mom works?" "Downtown," she says, "in the tall building with blue lights. She cleans the offices when everyone's gone." He frowns, thinking. That's near his company's tower. Lumen AI, 20 floors of engineers and glowing screens. Maybe their paths have crossed without either realizing. "Has your mom ever been late before?" he asks. Sophie shakes her head. "Never. She said if something bad ever happens, I should go somewhere with lights and people, so I came here. I could see the big clock." Evan follows her gaze to the illuminated clock above the station entrance. Rain beads down its glass face. The second hand ticks steady. "You did the right thing," he says softly. Sophie looks unconvinced. "Then why does it still hurt?" Her small question slices through him. He wants to tell her everything gets better, but he knows too well that time doesn't erase pain. It only teaches you to live beside it. He sits back, watching her trace circles on the table with one finger. The brass sun catches the light again, gleaming faintly, like it's trying to remind them both of something they haven't yet learned. Outside, the drizzle thickens once more. The world beyond the window grows dim. Neither of them notices the figure that lingers near the glass door, watching. The bell above the diner door jingles, sharp and sudden. A gust of damp air sweeps through, carrying the scent of rain and stale beer. Sophie flinches. Her cocoa ripples in its cup. Evan glances toward the entrance, his posture tightening almost imperceptibly. A man stands there, mid-40s, heavy-set, unshaven. His jacket is stained, his eyes glassy, unfocused. He scans the room, finds the small girl in the corner booth, and grins. "There you are," he slurs. "You had me looking all over." Sophie's face drains of color. "No," she whispers. "No, no." She slides back in the booth until her small frame presses against the wall. Her doll slips to the floor. Evan's voice is calm but firm. "Can I help you, sir?" The man stumbles forward, pointing a finger. "You can move out of my way. That's my kid." Sophie curls tighter, shaking her head. "You're not my dad," she says, voice breaking. The waitress freezes halfway across the room, coffee pot in hand. The few late-night customers glance over, uneasy. Evan rises slowly, placing himself between Sophie and the man. "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding." The man's grin hardens. "No misunderstanding. Emily's my woman. That's my daughter. Now move." The smell of alcohol hits strong as he takes another step. Evan doesn't back down. "Then you'll have proof. Custody papers, ID." The man laughs harshly. "I don't need papers to take what's mine." Sophie's breath comes quick, her small fists clutching the edge of the seat. Evan sees the terror in her eyes, the same look he once saw in hospital hallways after his sister's accident, when people didn't believe what she'd endured. He steadies his tone. "You're not taking her anywhere." "Who the hell are you?" The man spits. "Someone who doesn't let children get dragged out into the rain." The man's face twists. "You think you can stop me?" Evan doesn't raise his voice. "Yes." There's a stillness, thick and fragile, like the diner itself is holding its breath. Then the man lunges forward, trying to reach around him. Evan blocks with a shoulder, firm but controlled, keeping his balance. The waitress gasps. "Lock the door," Evan says quietly, eyes never leaving the man. The cook behind the counter moves fast, flipping the bolt. The man bangs a fist against the frame. "You'll regret this," he snarls. "She's mine." Evan's phone is already in his hand. "You need to leave now. I'm calling the police." The man hesitates at the sound of it. Sirens in his imagination, maybe old trouble catching up. His jaw tightens. He glares at Sophie, then at Evan. "You don't know who you're messing with." "Maybe not," Evan replies evenly. "But I know she's not going with you." Outside, a car horn echoes down the empty street. The man curses, steps back, and storms out into the drizzle. The door slams so hard the windows rattle. Evan exhales slowly, adrenaline humming through his chest. He keeps his gaze on the glass until the man's shadow disappears into the dark. The waitress edges closer. "You okay?" Evan nods. "Call 911. Tell them a man tried to take a child. Give a description. I'll stay with her." Sophie's breathing is shallow. Her doll lies crumpled on the tile. Evan bends down, retrieves it carefully, and places it back in her arms. "He's gone," he says quietly. "You're safe." She shakes her head. "He'll come back." "Not tonight," Evan assures her. "We'll wait for the officers." Her lip trembles. "He hurt my mom." The words cut through him. He crouches beside the booth. "Your mom's hurt?" Sophie nods, tears spilling now. "He hit her. I ran." Evan's jaw tightens. The rain beats harder against the window. He puts a hand, steady, measured, on the edge of the table. "You did the right thing, Sophie. You got to safety." The cook peeks out from the kitchen. "Cops are on their way, man. 5 minutes." "Thanks," Evan says without turning. His attention stays on Sophie, who's trembling so hard her teeth chatter. He pulls off his jacket, drapes it gently around her shoulders. The tailored fabric hangs large and warm, smelling faintly of rain and cedar. "It's okay," he murmurs. "You're safe now. No one's touching you." She buries her face in the sleeve, muffled sobs shaking her frame. Outside, red and blue lights flicker against the wet street. The sirens grow clearer, steadfast, certain. Evan stands, signals to the officers through the glass. One look at his composed but serious expression, and they hurry inside. He gives them the facts. Quick, concise, no drama. The man's description. The attempted abduction. Sophie's fear. The officers nod, professional but concerned. One kneels beside her, speaking gently. She doesn't answer, just clutches the doll tighter. Evan stays close but doesn't interrupt. He knows trust is fragile, and this little girl has already spent too much of hers. When the officers step aside to radio dispatch, he finally exhales. His reflection in the window meets his own eyes, those same blue eyes that have seen 1,000 meetings, headlines, cameras. But tonight, they hold something different. Purpose. Rain had faded to mist when the officers finished their questions. One of them, a kind-eyed woman with a notepad tucked under her arm, crouched near Sophie again. "Your mom's name is Emily, right?" she asked softly. Sophie nodded. "Do you know where she might be right now?" Sophie's voice was small. "At work? Or—" She was. Evan watched from the side, hands in his pockets trying not to let his anger show. The thought of that man, drunk, violent, chasing a terrified child through the city, burned in him. He forced himself to breathe, to stay focused. The officer rose and turned to him. "We'll send a unit to check the cleaning company downtown. Sounds like the mother could be in danger too." "Then I'm going with you," Evan said. The officer hesitated. "Sir, you've already done plenty. We'll handle it." Evan met her gaze, steady and unyielding. "You'll need someone she trusts. Right now, that's me." A pause. Then a quiet nod. "All right. Follow us in your car. We'll escort the girl." Sophie looked up, alarmed. "You're not leaving, right?" Evan knelt beside her again. I'll be right behind you, okay? You'll see my car the whole time. She studied him for a moment, then nodded, her small hand tightening around his sleeve before she let go. They moved quickly. The officers led Sophie outside under their umbrellas, the mist turning their lights into halos. Evan followed close behind, unlocking his car. The city at this hour felt hushed, streets glistening with puddles and neon reflections. He drove behind the patrol car, headlights carving through the haze. His phone buzzed with missed calls, messages from his board, his assistant, reminders of a world that felt trivial now. When they reached the downtown block, the security guard out front was pacing near the glass doors. His uniform was damp, his face pale. "She's inside," he said, voice shaking. "Been trying to get her out for 10 minutes, but the guy keeps coming back, banging on the service door." The officer's partner nodded to Evan. "Stay with the girl." Evan crouched by the backseat window. Sophie pressed her forehead to the glass. "Is my mom okay?" He managed a calm tone. "She will be." Moments later, shouting echoed down the alley, then the unmistakable clang of a door forced open. The officers moved fast, flashlights cutting across the walls. A man's slurred yelling broke into curses, then faded under the weight of commands shouted with authority. It was over within minutes. The female officer guided Emily out. A woman in her early 30s, her dark hair pulled into a loose bun. Her uniform shirt streaked with cleaning solution and rain. Her cheek was bruised, her lip cut, but her posture stayed upright. When Sophie saw her, she threw open the car door and ran. "Mom!" Emily dropped to her knees on the wet pavement, catching her daughter with trembling arms. She buried her face in Sophie's hair, sobbing into her shoulder. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Evan stepped back, giving them space. His throat tightened. The relief in Emily's cry was raw, an echo of every moment he'd wished his sister could have been saved. One of the officers approached Emily gently. "We'll need to take your statement. The man's in custody for the night, but we'll push for a restraining order first thing in the morning." Emily nodded numbly, still clutching Sophie. Her eyes darted toward Evan. Were you the one who called?" He nodded. "Sophie found me. I just did what anyone would." Her eyes glistened. "No, most people wouldn't." Sophie looked between them, her small voice quivering. "He scared me, Mommy, but Evan stayed." Emily's lips trembled into something like a smile. "You kept her safe?" "I tried," Evan said quietly. "She did most of the brave part." The officer gestured toward the patrol car. "There's a family shelter across town, Harbor House, safe, supervised. We can escort you there tonight." Emily hesitated, looking down at her uniform, her shaking hands. I don't have money with me. My bag's still inside." Evan spoke before she could finish. "I'll cover whatever's needed, and I'll drive behind the escort." She blinked, taken aback. "You don't even know us." He paused, rain dripping from his hair. "Sometimes that's when it matters most." She studied him for a long moment, as if searching for the reason behind his steady tone. Then she nodded. "Thank you." The officers opened the back seat for them. Sophie climbed in first, clutching her doll. Emily followed, keeping one protective arm wrapped around her daughter. As the patrol car pulled away, Evan's headlights fell in behind them again. The drizzle turned to a fine silver rain, washing the city clean. For the first time that night, he felt something quiet in his chest. Purpose, maybe. Or simply the sense that he was exactly where he needed to be. He didn't yet know that this was the night his life would change forever. The rain had thinned to a silver mist by the time they reached Harbor House, a modest brick building tucked between two warehouses, its porch light burning like a promise. Evan parked behind the patrol car and stepped out. The air smelled of wet asphalt and jasmine from the shelter's garden beds. Inside, the lobby was small but warm. A mural of painted hands lined one wall. The other bore a corkboard covered in children's drawings and notes of thanks. The night clerk, a middle-aged woman in a cardigan, greeted the officers with quiet efficiency. Evan held the door for Emily and Sophie. Sophie's doll dangled from one arm, its fabric limp with rain. She looked around at the couches, the bulletin board, the gentle light. "It's pretty here," she said softly. Emily managed a faint smile. "It's safe. That's what matters." The officer nodded. "We'll have a counselor come by in the morning to talk through next steps. For tonight, you'll stay here under protection." Evan lingered near the doorway, unsure how far to intrude. He'd seen shelters before, on donation visits through his foundation, but never from this side of the story. The quiet hum of safety felt almost sacred. The female officer turned to him. "You've done more than enough, Mr. Cross. We can take it from here." He looked down at Sophie, who was tracing the brass sun pendant with her thumb. "I'd like to stay until they're settled," he said, "just to make sure they have everything they need." Emily hesitated, her voice low. "You really don't have to—" "I know," he interrupted gently, "but I want to." She studied him for a long moment, perhaps wondering if there was a hidden motive, some unspoken debt, but there was only sincerity in his tone, the kind of quiet steadiness that people recognize when they've known too much chaos. The clerk led them down a short hallway lined with small rooms, each holding 2 beds, a nightstand, and a shelf of donated books. The walls were painted pale yellow, like captured sunlight. "This one's open," the clerk said kindly. "Fresh sheets and towels. Breakfast at 7. Sophie climbed onto the bed nearest the window. Her small fingers tugged at the curtain, peeking out toward the parking lot. When she spotted Evan's car still outside, her shoulders relaxed. Emily knelt beside her daughter, brushing damp strands of hair from her forehead. "Try to sleep, sweetheart. We're safe now." "But what if he comes back?" "He won't," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. "The police will make sure." Evan cleared his throat softly. "And so will I." Emily turned to him, startled. "You?" He nodded. "My foundation supports Harbor House. I'll make a few calls, add extra security cameras, maybe a night guard for the next week, just until things calm down." Her lips parted, a mix of disbelief and gratitude. "You'd really do that?" He smiled faintly. "Consider it handled." The exhaustion in her face cracked into something softer. "I don't even know how to thank you." "You already did," he said quietly, glancing at Sophie. "You came back for her." For a moment, none of them spoke. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking a fragile piece. Then Sophie reached over to her backpack, rummaging through the few items she'd managed to keep: a crumpled coloring book, 2 crayons, a folded napkin. She pulled out a small piece of paper covered in shaky lines. "It's for you," she said, handing it to Evan. He unfolded it carefully. Crayon figures filled the page. 3 people beneath a bright yellow sun. One, tall, with blue glasses and brown hair. Beside him, a woman with long hair and a small girl holding a doll. Above them, in child's handwriting, she'd scrawled one word: family. Evan's breath caught. "You drew this?" Sophie nodded shyly. "That's you," she said, pointing to the figure with the glasses. "I put you in because you helped." He smiled, blinking hard. "It's beautiful, Sophie. Thank you." Emily watched him, her eyes glistening. She hasn't drawn anything since her dad left. He folded the picture carefully, tucking it into his inner pocket like something fragile and irreplaceable. "Then I'll keep this one safe." The night clerk returned with a clipboard. "We'll need an emergency contact for the file," she said. Emily hesitated. "I don't have anyone here in the city." The clerk smiled kindly. "Then you can list Mr. Cross, if he's willing." Evan nodded immediately. "Of course." He took the pen, signed his name, Evan Cross, and wrote his number below. Seeing it on paper next to theirs felt strange, grounding. When he handed the clipboard back, Emily exhaled softly. "You really don't have to do all this." He looked at her, the exhaustion on her face, the fierce protectiveness in her eyes. "Maybe not," he said, "but I've learned that sometimes doing something small can change everything." Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The city lights shimmered against the wet pavement, reflecting gold. Evan turned to leave, but Sophie's voice stopped him. "Wait." She slid off the bed and ran to him, pressing her brass pendant into his palm. "Hold it while I sleep," she said earnestly. "It'll keep you safe, too." He stared at it, a hand-etched sun, worn from years of touch, and felt something stir deep inside. "I'll keep it close," he promised, "and I'll bring it back when you're ready to be brave again." Sophie nodded, satisfied, and climbed back into bed. As Evan stepped into the hallway, Emily's voice followed him softly. "Good night, Mr. Cross." He paused, turning back. "Evan," he corrected gently. "Good night, Emily." And for the first time in years, he walked into the rain feeling like a piece of his heart had quietly found its way home. The next morning broke clear and gold, sunlight spilling across the damp sidewalks outside Harbor House. Evan sat in his car across the street, coffee cooling beside him, watching the front door. He hadn't meant to stay this long, but something about leaving before they were truly safe felt wrong, unfinished. When the shelter door opened, he saw Emily step out with Sophie. Emily's uniform had been replaced by simple jeans and a soft gray sweater someone at the shelter must have loaned her. Sophie wore a donated yellow raincoat a size too big, the sleeves rolled up to her wrists. They both looked cleaner, calmer, but wary. Evan got out, waving lightly so he wouldn't startle them. "Morning." Sophie's face lit up. "You came back." "I told you I'd bring your pendant." He reached into his pocket and opened his palm. The brass sun gleamed faintly in the morning light. "You forgot your magic." Sophie giggled and ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist before taking the pendant back. "Now you'll be safe too," she said solemnly. "I think I already am," he replied. Emily approached, slower, still guarded. "You really didn't have to come, Mr. Evan." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to check in, make sure you both slept all right." "We did," she said, smiling faintly. "First good night in months." "That's good to hear." He hesitated, then added, "I also called in a favor. There's a lawyer, someone from my foundation's legal team. She specializes in protective orders and family law. She'll meet you here at 10. Emily blinked, stunned. You did all that overnight?" He shrugged modestly. "It's amazing what coffee and Wi-Fi can accomplish." Her lips twitched despite herself. "You don't stop, do you?" "Not when it matters." Sophie tugged on her mother's hand. "Can he have breakfast with us, Mommy?" Emily hesitated, eyes flicking toward him. "We don't want to take your time." "I've got plenty," Evan said, "and the diner's open." So they walked together, crossing the street toward the same warm booth that had started everything. The waitress recognized them, a spark of relief flashing in her eyes when she saw Sophie smiling instead of crying. "Well, look who's back," she said, setting down menus. "Hot cocoa again?" Sophie nodded eagerly. Evan grinned. "And coffee for me. Make it strong enough to wake the dead." The waitress laughed and shuffled off. Emily settled into the seat opposite him, still visibly uneasy about accepting so much kindness from a stranger. "You don't have to keep helping, you know," she said quietly. He leaned back. "I'm not helping out of obligation, Emily. I'm helping because last night reminded me what it means to be human." She looked down, fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "Most people don't think about strangers like that." "Maybe they just forget," he said softly. For a while, they ate in silence. Sophie swung her feet under the booth, humming between bites of pancakes. Her laughter filled the space in a way that softened the edges of everything. "So," Evan said finally, "you'll meet with the lawyer today. After that, we'll work out a longer-term plan." "We?" she asked, brow lifting. He nodded. "My company sponsors a small housing program, transition apartments near the university, families recovering from crisis. It's private, secure, and furnished. I'll cover the first 6 months if you'd consider moving in." Her fork froze mid-air. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." She stared at him, her voice trembling slightly. "Why us?" He met her eyes, calm but earnest. "Because last night I realized something. For years, I built machines to predict danger, to make cities smarter, safer. But I forgot what safety actually looks like. It's people showing up for each other when it counts. Emily swallowed hard. You don't even know me. Not yet, he said softly. But I know you've done everything to protect your daughter. That's enough for me. Her gaze fell to the table. You have no idea what this means. Maybe I do, he said quietly, remembering the hospital corridors of his own past, the unanswered calls. Maybe more than you think. When the waitress returned with the check, Evan slid his card across before Emily could reach for her bag. I can pay for breakfast, she protested gently. Then you can get the next one, he said, smiling. She hesitated, then smiled back. Deal. As they stepped outside, Sophie slipped her hand into his. You don't look like the other grown-ups, she said thoughtfully. Oh? Evan chuckled. What do they look like? They don't see things, she said simply. You saw me? He froze for a moment, struck by the quiet truth in her words. Then he knelt, brushing a strand of hair from her face. That's because you were shining too bright to miss. Her grin returned. Like the sun. Exactly, he said. Emily watched them, her expression softening. Something in her posture, once wary, now open, told him trust was starting to take root. The brass pendant glimmered between them, catching the sunlight as Sophie twirled it in her fingers. For the first time in years, Evan felt the warmth of connection. Not the transactional kind that came with boardrooms and deals, but the fragile human kind that made the world worth fixing. And though none of them could know it yet, that small morning breakfast would mark the quiet beginning of a bond strong enough to change all three of their lives. Late morning sunlight slanted through the tall shelter windows, painting stripes of gold across the lobby floor. Emily sat at a small table with her hands folded, waiting for the legal representative Evan had promised. Sophie colored quietly beside her, tongue between her teeth, drawing more suns across the page. Every one had different rays, some bright yellow, some pale orange. Evan arrived right on time, crisp as ever, his dark suit traded for a casual navy shirt and rolled sleeves. Still, he carried that same air of quiet authority, someone used to solving impossible problems and making others believe they could too. Morning, he greeted gently. How's my favorite artist? Sophie beamed. I made you another son. He crouched beside her, studying the crayon lines. Looks perfect. You're going to need a gallery at this rate. Emily smiled despite herself. You'll spoil her. I think she's earned a little spoiling, Evan said, rising as the attorney approached. Hi, Janet. Thanks for coming so quickly. Janet Rivera, mid-40s, calm, professional, shook Emily's hand and introduced herself. We'll start with the restraining order paperwork, she explained. Once filed, it'll be effective within hours. I'll also make sure your employer knows what happened so he can't approach your workplace again. Emily's throat tightened. He's been showing up for weeks. I kept hoping he'd stop. Janet gave her a look of understanding. Most abusers don't just stop, but this will help. You're not alone anymore. Evan stepped back, letting them talk, though his gaze remained steady, protective, grounded. He watched Emily sign each form with trembling hands. He'd signed thousands of documents in his life, contracts, acquisitions, mergers, but he'd never seen ink carry this much weight. When they finished, Janet stood. I'll take these to the courthouse now. You'll get confirmation this afternoon. Thank you, Emily said softly. After Janet left, Emily leaned back, exhaustion etched into her features. I can't believe it's really over. Evan shook his head. It's not over yet, but it's the beginning of better. She smiled faintly. You sound like someone who's practiced hope. He chuckled. Maybe someone who's relearning it. Sophie reached over and tugged on Emily's sleeve. Can we show him the garden? Emily blinked. Garden? Sophie nodded eagerly. Miss Carla said there's one behind the building, with flowers and a swing. Evan grinned. Now that sounds like a solid plan. They stepped outside together, following a narrow path lined with faded stepping stones. The small courtyard was quiet, surrounded by vines and patches of wildflowers. A single wooden swing hung from the low branch of a sturdy oak. Sophie ran to it instantly, laughter rising in the warm air. Emily stood under the shade, watching her daughter swing higher, the yellow raincoat flaring out like a bright petal. "She hasn't laughed like that in a long time," she said softly. Evan leaned against the railing nearby. "Children remember joy faster than we do." Emily glanced at him. "And you? Do you have any kids?" He hesitated before answering. "No, just a lot of godchildren who think I'm more fun than I really am." Her lips curved faintly. "You seem like you'd be good with them." "Maybe because I still remember what it's like to need someone to show up," he said quietly. She tilted her head. "Your sister?" He nodded once, gaze distant. "She was 2 years younger. Brilliant, stubborn, funny. I was supposed to drive her home that night." "I'm sorry," Emily murmured. He smiled gently. "Me too. But I think she'd like to know that something good came out of the loss." They fell silent, both watching Sophie twist the swing's ropes and spin until she laughed herself dizzy. For a brief, golden moment, the world seemed simple again. Just sunlight, laughter, and the fragile thread of connection pulling 3 lives closer. When Sophie finally slowed, she ran back, clutching a daisy she'd picked from the garden bed. "Here," she said, offering it to Evan. He crouched to accept it, touched by the small gesture. "Another masterpiece?" "It's for your sister," Sophie said. "You can give it to her next time you visit." Evan froze, then swallowed hard. "That's very kind of you, Sophie. I think she'd love that." Emily's eyes softened, tears threatening but held back. "You really have a gift with people," she said quietly. "I just listen," he replied. "Most of the world forgets to." The moment hung between them, gentle, unspoken, full of quiet understanding. Then Sophie tugged his sleeve again. "Can you push me on the swing?" He laughed, setting down his coffee cup. "You got it, Captain." As he gave the swing a careful push, her laughter rang brighter than the wind. Emily watched them. This man who'd appeared out of nowhere, who'd stood between her daughter and danger, who spoke with both strength and tenderness. For the first time in years, she felt something stirring inside her that wasn't fear or exhaustion. Hope, fragile and real. And in that tiny garden behind the shelter, a bond began to deepen, not built on rescue, but on recognition. The kind that makes strangers feel like family before they even realize it's happening. That afternoon, sunlight stretched long across the shelter courtyard, filtering through the oak leaves. The air was warm enough for open windows, carrying the smell of soap and fresh laundry through the halls. Inside, Evan sat with Sophie at a table covered in paper and crayons while Emily met with the counselor in the next room. Sophie was teaching him how to draw suns properly. "Not just lines, you have to make them dance," she said. He tried, laughing quietly when his rays came out uneven. "Not bad," she declared, "but mine's happier." Evan grinned. "I think you might be right." The counselor stepped out of the office. "Emily's finished. She'd like to see you both." Sophie hopped off her chair and ran ahead. Emily stood by the doorway, holding a folder the counselor had given her. Her face looked calmer, lighter somehow, though there was still the shadow of fatigue behind her eyes. "The court processed the order," she said. "He's officially not allowed within 100 yards of us. They even put it on record at my job." Evan nodded approvingly. "That's a solid start." Emily took a breath, glancing down at the folder. "I still can't believe all this happened in 24 hours. I keep waiting to wake up back in that apartment, listening for footsteps." "You won't," Evan said quietly. "Not again." For a moment, silence settled between them, one filled with relief and the fragile beginnings of trust. The counselor excused herself politely, leaving them alone in the small office. A faint hum of traffic drifted in from outside, mingling with the laughter of kids playing down the hall. Evan spoke first. "I meant what I said this morning. I can move you into one of the transition apartments tomorrow. The paperwork's already cleared." Emily's brows lifted. "You work fast." He smiled faintly. Perks of being the guy who signs the forms. She studied him carefully. You own that program, don't you? Harbor Foundation. I started it a few years back, he admitted. My team runs it now, but I've stayed close. I guess I always wanted to build something that fixed what I couldn't. Her expression softened. Your sister again? He nodded. She was in an abusive relationship. I didn't see the signs until it was too late. Emily swallowed. So, this helping us, it's more than charity. It's a second chance, he said simply. Maybe for me, as much as for anyone. She looked down, her fingers tracing the spine of the folder. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. Just take the chance. Her eyes met his. You really think we can start over? I know you can, he said, and I'll be here to make sure you get the space to do it safely. Sophie peeked into the room then, hair tousled, holding another drawing. Look, it's us in the garden. Mommy's watering the flowers, and you're pushing me on the swing. Evan crouched to see it. That's a masterpiece. You even drew my glasses. She giggled. You forgot them last time. Emily smiled, shaking her head. She doesn't forget much. Good, Evan said, glancing at Sophie. The world needs people who remember the good parts. As they left the office together, the hallways buzzed with quiet life. Voices, the scrape of chairs, the clink of dishes from the kitchen. It felt ordinary, peaceful. For Emily, that ordinary was a miracle. They stepped outside to the parking lot where Evan's car waited. He turned to her. I've arranged for a driver tomorrow morning. He'll bring a small moving van to pick up what's left from your old place. 2 officers will accompany him for safety. Her breath caught. You really thought of everything. He shrugged modestly. Habit. She hesitated, then reached out and touched his sleeve. Evan, you didn't have to stay involved after last night. Most people would have just called the cops and gone home. He looked at her, the late sunlight catching in his blue eyes. I guess I wasn't ready to go home. She didn't respond right away, but the softness in her gaze said everything she couldn't yet put into words. Sophie tugged at their hands, looking up at both of them. Can we get ice cream? You said safe people get treats. Evan laughed, caught off guard. Did I say that? You did, Sophie insisted. You said brave people and safe people deserve something sweet. Emily chuckled. You walked right into that one. Evan raised his hands in surrender. All right, I'm outnumbered. Ice cream it is. A few minutes later, they sat on a low brick wall by a corner shop, cones melting faster than they could eat. Sophie smeared chocolate across her chin. Emily laughed, wiping her clean with a napkin. For the first time, laughter sounded natural between them, free from fear. Evan glanced at them both, feeling something he hadn't in years. Not pity, not duty, connection. A sense of belonging he hadn't realized he missed. As the sun dipped lower, Sophie leaned against her mother's side. Can we see the stars tonight? She murmured sleepily. Emily kissed the top of her head. If the sky stays clear. Evan smiled faintly. You'll see more than stars soon, Sophie. You'll see tomorrow. And, for a brief golden second, Emily looked at him like she believed it. The next morning dawned bright and quiet, a soft breeze pushing white curtains through the open shelter windows. Emily stood in the small communal kitchen, helping Sophie pour cereal into a bowl, while the other residents chatted over coffee. For the first time in weeks, her shoulders weren't tight with fear. Evan arrived just after 8. He wore a charcoal gray blazer over an open-collared shirt, less the commanding CEO, more the friend you could lean on. He knocked gently on the frame before stepping inside. Good morning, he said, smiling. Ready for moving day? Sophie's eyes lit up. Do we get to ride in your car again? Evan grinned. If Mom says it's okay. Emily looked up from the counter. Only if you promise not to spoil her with music and snacks this time. No promises, he teased. But I'll try. They loaded the last of their things, a worn duffel, a plastic bag of clothes, and Sophie's doll, into the car. The police escort met them at the old apartment to ensure it was empty. Evan waited by the curb while Emily climbed the steps one last time. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of bleach and cigarette smoke. Her heart pounded as she stepped into what used to be home. The couch still bore the tear in the fabric he'd made during one of his rages. A dent marked the wall near the doorframe. She touched it once, then exhaled, letting it go. "Mom?" Sophie whispered from the hall. Emily turned, smiled softly. "Come on, sweetheart. We're done here." She locked the door behind her for the last time. The officers nodded, satisfied, and left. In the car, Evan kept the radio low, classical music threading quietly through the silence. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Emily stared out the window, the city passing in blurred fragments. "It's strange. You think you'll feel relief when something's over, but it's more like," she searched for the word, "emptiness. Like I have to relearn what peace even sounds like." Evan nodded. "Peace is quiet. It can take a while to trust that quiet again." Sophie leaned forward between the seats. "Does that mean we get to have new sounds?" Evan smiled at her reflection in the rearview mirror. "Yes, it does." "What kind of sounds would you like?" "Laughter," she said immediately. "And pancakes sizzling." Emily laughed softly. "She's easy to please." Evan smiled back. "Then that's our first goal." They pulled into a tree-lined street near the university. The building was modest but bright, with flower boxes beneath each window. The caretaker, an older woman named Mrs. Alvarez, greeted them warmly and handed over the keys. "Welcome home," she said. Sophie ran through the small apartment in delight, her shoes tapping across the wooden floor. "It smells like cookies," she said. "That's because Mrs. Alvarez bakes too much," Evan said. Emily wandered through each room in silence. The two small bedrooms, the clean kitchen, the window that opened to morning light instead of an alley. She turned to him finally, her eyes glistening. "It's beautiful." "It's yours," Evan said. "For as long as you need it." Her voice caught. "I don't know how to repay you." "Don't try," he said softly. "Just live here. Fill it with laughter and pancakes." She blinked back tears, nodding slowly. "You have no idea what this means to us." "Maybe I do," he murmured. Sophie ran back, dragging her doll by the arm. "Can we make it sunny?" she asked, holding up the brass pendant. Evan knelt beside her. "Always, Sophie." She pressed the pendant into his palm again, just as she had that first night. "You hold it until we fill the house with happy sounds." He smiled. "Deal." As they unpacked, Evan stayed to help set up the small table, fix a loose curtain rod, and install a new lock on the door. Emily watched him work, sleeves rolled up, focused and patient. He looked out of place among the cardboard boxes, yet somehow perfectly at home. When the last screw was tightened, he straightened, brushing dust from his hands. "There," he said. "Safe and secure." Emily crossed her arms, smiling. "You really don't stop until everything's perfect, do you?" He shrugged, grinning. "Occupational hazard." She stepped closer. "Do you ever do anything halfway?" "Not the things that matter," he said quietly. Something in the way he said it made her pause. She realized how long it had been since she'd stood this close to a man and felt safe. His presence wasn't demanding. It was steady, patient, grounding. "Thank you, Evan," she said finally, "for all of this." He smiled, meeting her eyes. "You don't have to thank me every time." "I think I do," she whispered. Outside, Sophie's laughter echoed from the courtyard below. The brass sun pendant gleamed in Evan's open hand, catching a streak of sunlight through the window. "Then maybe," he said softly, "you'll let me thank you someday too." "For what?" "For reminding me what light looks like." Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The new home smelled faintly of dust and beginnings, and somewhere in the air between them was the sense that this, whatever it was just starting to take shape. Downstairs, Sophie called from the courtyard. "Come see the flowers, Mommy. Evan, too." They laughed, breaking the tension, and followed her outside. And as the three of them stepped into the sunlight together, the quiet edges of their separate lives began, at last, to blur. Late afternoon sunlight poured through the courtyard, drenching the garden in gold. The air carried the scent of damp earth and blooming lavender. Sophie sat cross-legged on the grass, humming softly while she arranged tiny stones into the shape of a sun. Emily watched from the patio, sleeves rolled up, folding the last of their clean laundry. She looked peaceful, something Evan hadn't yet seen in her. Every so often she glanced toward the street, maybe out of habit, but not in fear anymore. Evan leaned against the doorway, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. "Peace offering," he said. She smiled. "For what?" "For over-tightening your curtain rod this morning. I think it could survive a hurricane now." She laughed, accepting the glass. "I'll sleep better knowing that." They sat at the small patio table, the quiet between them easy. Sophie called from the yard, "Mommy, Evan, look!" She lifted her stone sun proudly. "That's perfect," Emily said. "You made your own sunrise." Evan smiled. "She's got an engineer's precision." "She gets that from my dad," Emily said softly, eyes warming. "He taught me to fix things when I was little. Said you can always make something work again if you're patient enough." Evan turned the glass in his hand. "Sounds like good advice." It was. She looked down. "He passed 2 years ago. After that, everything fell apart. You ended up here," he finished gently. She nodded. "I kept thinking if I just stayed quiet, if I just worked harder, it would get better. But people like him, they feed on silence." Evan's gaze steadied on her. "You're not silent anymore." She met his eyes. "No, not anymore." The moment lingered. Quiet, grounded, real. Then Sophie ran up, hair one-tangled, holding something behind her back. "Close your eyes," she said. They obeyed. She giggled, then set something on the table. "Okay, open." A drawing lay between their glasses. 3 stick figures again, one taller than the rest. Above them, the same brass sun with rays that filled the page. Beneath it, she'd written in uneven letters, "Our light." Emily's throat tightened. "Sophie." "It's us," Sophie explained proudly. "You, me, and Evan. Because we all followed the sun and found each other." Evan blinked hard, smiling through it. "That might be the best business logo I've ever seen." Sophie giggled, then darted back to her garden, leaving them speechless. Emily stared at the drawing, tracing the edges with her fingertips. "She's healing faster than I thought." "Kids do that when they feel safe," he said quietly. She looked at him then, really looked, and the gratitude in her eyes went deeper than words. "You gave her that safety." He shook his head. "You did. I just showed up." But she knew it wasn't that simple. He had changed the trajectory of their lives with quiet, deliberate care, never asking for anything in return. They fell silent again, listening to the distant sound of Sophie singing to her doll. After a moment, Emily spoke. "You ever wonder why people cross paths at exactly the right moment?" Evan considered. "Every day." "And what's your theory?" He smiled faintly. "That maybe some people are answers to questions we didn't know we were asking." Her eyes softened. "That's beautiful." He looked out at Sophie, then back at Emily. "She's your reason, but maybe she's also mine." The air stilled between them, heavy with things unspoken. Emily's heart beat faster, the way it used to before life taught her to expect disappointment. But Evan didn't push, didn't fill the silence with promises. He simply sat there, present, patient. Sophie's laughter drifted through the fading light, and Emily whispered, "I forgot what it feels like to believe in good people." Evan's voice was quiet but sure. "Then start again." For a while, they just stayed there, 2 adults who had lost too much, slowly learning that trust could grow again, even from broken soil. When the sun finally dipped behind the rooftops, Sophie climbed into Emily's lap, eyes heavy with sleep. Evan stood, adjusting his cuffs. "I should go. Big day tomorrow. Board meeting at 9. The city's launching the new AI safety grid." Emily smiled. "You build systems that protect people you'll never even meet." He looked down at her. And somehow, the people who needed protecting found me first. She didn't know what to say to that, so she just whispered, "Good night, Evan." He paused, sunlight flickering across his glasses as he smiled. "Good night, Emily. Good night, sunshine," he added to Sophie, who waved sleepily. As he walked toward his car, he reached into his pocket and touched the folded drawing she'd given him. Our Light. It was a strange kind of peace, the kind that doesn't erase pain but gives it meaning, and for the first time in 10 years, Evan Cross felt that maybe his sister's sun hadn't gone out at all. It had simply found its way into 2 new hearts. The following week passed quietly, almost like the city was holding its breath after the storm. Evan balanced long work days with quiet evenings checking in on Emily and Sophie. He never overstayed, just a call here, a quick stop with groceries there, but somehow his presence had become part of their rhythm. At Lumen AI headquarters, glass walls reflected the skyline. The company's new safety grid went live, a system designed to predict emergencies before they happened. But while the board applauded numbers and charts, Evan's thoughts drifted elsewhere, to a little girl building stone suns in a courtyard and a mother learning how to breathe again. After the meeting, his assistant Jordan approached. "You've been different lately," she said with a teasing smile. "Less machine, more human." Evan laughed softly. "I'll take that as progress." Jordan tilted her head. "Whatever it is, keep it. You actually look content." He smiled, but inside he wondered how long peace could last before the world found a way to test it again. That evening, he stopped by the apartment. The smell of pancakes hit him before he knocked. Emily opened the door, wearing an apron dusted with flour. "You're just in time," she said. "Sophie insisted we make breakfast for dinner." From inside, Sophie shouted, "Because you said pancakes mean happy sounds." Evan grinned. "I did, didn't I?" They ate together at the small kitchen table, laughter spilling between bites. Sophie talked about her new school, her favorite teacher, the friend who gave her a sticker shaped like a cat. Emily listened, her face soft with pride. When Sophie finished, she carried her plate to the sink. "Can I watch the stars after my bath?" "Only for a little," Emily said. "It's a school night." Sophie ran off down the hall singing to herself. Evan leaned back, smiling. "She's really settling in." "She is," Emily said. "And it's because of you." He shook his head. "Because of you, Emily. You gave her courage to heal." She looked at him, eyes thoughtful. "You talk about courage like it's easy, but you don't know how many nights I sat awake, too afraid to sleep because I didn't know if we'd be safe by morning." He held her gaze. "I do know. Different fear, maybe, but I know what it means to live in the aftermath of something you couldn't control." She hesitated, her voice soft. "Your sister?" He nodded slowly. "I thought if I worked hard enough, if I built something powerful enough, maybe I could make up for not saving her. But all the technology in the world can't replace showing up when someone needs you most." Emily's eyes glistened. "And you showed up for us." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's how the universe balances things. I couldn't save her, but maybe I could help you both find safety again." The quiet between them deepened. Not awkward, but intimate. Emily reached across the table and rested her hand on his. His pulse quickened, though neither moved away. "Evan," she said softly, "you don't have to keep doing this. For me. For us. You've already done more than I can repay." "I'm not doing this because I have to," he said. "I'm doing it because I want to, because I care." Her breath caught. "Why?" He hesitated, searching for words that felt true. "Because somewhere between the rain and the diner and that little brass sun, I started remembering what it feels like to matter to someone again." Emily didn't speak. She didn't need to. The air between them said enough. A few moments later, Sophie's voice called from the hallway, "Mom, can Evan tuck me in?" Emily blinked, smiling through her tears. "You've been promoted." Evan chuckled, rising from his chair. "That's the best job title I've ever had." He followed Sophie into her room. The nightlight cast soft, golden patterns on the wall, shaped like tiny suns. She was already under the blanket, her doll tucked beside her. "Can I tell you a secret?" she whispered. "Sure." "When I was scared that night, I thought the sun forgot us, but I think it was just waiting for you to find it." Evan felt his chest tighten. "You're a wise one, Sophie." "Mom says brave people don't hide from the dark," she murmured sleepily. "They carry light in their pockets." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Then I guess I'll have to keep your sun pendant close." She grinned drowsily. "Good. Don't lose it." "I won't." He turned off the lamp, leaving the soft glow of the nightlight to guard her dreams. When he stepped back into the living room, Emily was waiting at the window, her arms folded loosely. "She trusts you completely," she said quietly. Evan joined her, gazing at the city lights beyond. "That's a rare kind of gift." "She's never trusted anyone that fast," Emily said, "and neither have I." He turned toward her. "Then I'll make sure I never give either of you a reason to regret it." She looked up at him, really looked, and for the first time, there was no fear left in her eyes, only warmth. "Good night, Evan," she whispered. He smiled. "Good night, Emily." As he left the apartment, he touched the pendant in his pocket and glanced at the night sky. The stars glimmered faintly above the city haze, and he found himself whispering to his sister, "I think I finally understand what you meant by following the light." 2 weeks later, spring had melted fully into summer. The city air carried the scent of cut grass and food trucks drifting up from the plaza. Life at the new apartment had settled into a gentle rhythm. Sophie off to school each morning, Emily starting her daytime housekeeping job at a local hotel, and Evan showing up whenever the world allowed him a moment to breathe. That afternoon, he arrived with a small box tucked under his arm. Emily was watering the garden when she spotted him through the gate. "You're early," she said, smiling. "Board meeting wrapped ahead of schedule. Figured I'd trade spreadsheets for sunshine." "Good trade," she teased. He stepped closer, holding out the box. "A little something for you both." Emily raised an eyebrow. "You know we're running out of space for your surprises, right?" "Just open it," he said. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a small, sun-shaped nightlight, delicate, gold-edged, and glowing faintly even in daylight. Sophie ran over, eyes wide. "It's like my pendant." "It is," Evan said. "Custom design. Solar-powered, charges during the day, shines all night." Emily's smile faltered for a second, overcome by emotion. "You made this?" He shrugged. "I had my engineers owe me a favor." Sophie clutched the light to her chest. "Now we'll never be scared again." Evan knelt beside her. "Exactly. Even when things feel dark, light finds a way back." Emily watched him, her heart swelling. "You really thought of everything." He looked up at her, eyes soft. "Not everything. Just what matters." The afternoon slipped into quiet ease. Emily brewed coffee, and they sat on the patio listening to Sophie's laughter drift through the open window. The brass pendant and the new nightlight hung side by side, glinting in the soft sun. "She's doing better," Evan said after a moment. "More confident. I can see it." Emily nodded. "She sleeps through the night now. No more nightmares." He smiled. "That's progress." She hesitated. "And you? How's work? You've been quiet about it lately." He chuckled. "Oh, you know, corporate chaos as usual, but I've been thinking. Dangerous words from a man like you." He grinned. "Maybe, but I'm serious. The foundation's grown bigger than I ever planned. I want to focus on it full time, expand programs like Harbor House. Real change starts on the ground, not in glass towers." Emily's brow furrowed. "That's a huge decision." He nodded. "It is. But after meeting you and Sophie, I can't unsee what I've seen. I've built algorithms to detect suffering, but I forgot to look at the people right in front of me." Emily's voice softened. "You've already done so much good, Evan. But maybe this time it's not about fixing the world. It's about living in it." He studied her face, quiet for a moment. "You sound like my mother. She used to say you can't save people until you sit with them long enough to understand their story." Smart woman, Emily said. She was, he murmured. Sophie burst out the door then, holding a drawing. 3 suns, one bigger than the others, all surrounded by hearts. "It's us again," she announced proudly. "This one's for your office, Evan, so you don't forget us." Evan smiled, taking the paper carefully. "I could never forget you." Emily leaned back, watching them, something warm flickering in her chest. She hadn't realized how naturally he fit here. His laughter in the kitchen, his steady patience, the way Sophie trusted him without question. When Sophie went back inside to hang her new light, Emily turned to him. "You know, when I first saw you at the diner, I thought you were just some stranger who'd walk away once the police came." He tilted his head. "And now?" "Now, I think maybe you were meant to walk in instead." Evan met her gaze, something unguarded and real passing between them. "Emily," he said softly, "I've thought about that night more than I should. About how small moments turn into everything that matters." Her breath hitched. "You don't have to say anything." He shook his head. "I want to. You and Sophie. You reminded me of everything I forgot, chasing success. That love doesn't start with perfection. It starts with showing up, over and over." The air between them felt different now. Charged, yet calm, like the seconds before sunrise. Emily reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. "And you showed up when no one else did." He turned his hand, their palms meeting lightly. "Maybe that's because you both made me remember what it's like to be needed, and to need someone back." For a long moment, neither moved. A breeze lifted the curtains, carrying Sophie's humming from inside. Emily looked down at their joined hands, then back at him. "Evan, what happens now?" He smiled faintly. "We keep showing up, one day at a time." Just then, Sophie's voice echoed from the living room. "Mom! Evan! Come see, the light's glowing!" They laughed, standing together, and walked toward the doorway. The nightlight glowed gold against the wall, steady and bright. Sophie beamed. "See? It's magic." Evan looked at Emily, his voice low but certain. She's right. And for the first time in years, Emily believed in magic too. Evening settled softly over the city, turning the apartment windows into mirrors that caught the orange glow of the sunset. Sophie's laughter drifted from her bedroom, where she was arranging her dolls under the new golden nightlight. Emily stood at the stove, finishing dinner, her hair tucked loosely behind her ears. The simple rhythm of chopping and stirring had become its own kind of peace. Evan leaned against the doorway, sleeves rolled to his forearms, watching her in the gentle light. "Smells incredible," he said. "Don't sound so surprised," she teased. "I told you I can cook when life isn't on fire." He chuckled. "Fair point. I didn't think I'd ever eat anything homemade again that wasn't delivered in a cardboard box." "Then you're in for a treat," she said, smiling. "Sit. I'll get the plates." He sat at the small kitchen table, the same one they'd built together just weeks ago. The brass sun pendant hung from a hook near the window, catching the fading light. Everything in the apartment, the photos Sophie had drawn, the half-finished puzzle on the shelf, breathed life again. As they ate, Sophie told them stories about school. Her hands moved wildly, describing how she'd been picked to lead the line at recess because she walked the straightest. Evan listened with full attention, laughing at her seriousness. When dinner ended, Emily leaned back, watching the two of them. "You know," she said softly, "she talks about you constantly. Yesterday she told her teacher that her friend Evan builds lights for lost people." Evan smiled, looking down at his plate. "I think that's the kindest job description I've ever had." "It's also true," Emily said. "You built one for us." He glanced at her, their eyes meeting across the quiet table. "Maybe you built it too. I just helped plug it in." Her laugh caught in her throat, soft and uncertain. The room seemed to shrink until the only sounds were the hum of the refrigerator and Sophie humming from her room. After clearing the dishes, they stepped out onto the balcony. The city glowed below, traffic lights blinking red and gold, the skyline hazy under a rising moon. Evan rested his elbows on the railing, the night breeze tugging at his shirt sleeves. "Tomorrow's the launch event," he said. "The city's safety grid goes fully online. My team's excited, but it feels different this time. It's not about the data anymore. It's about the people behind it." Emily looked at him, her voice soft. "You've changed, Evan." He smiled faintly. "You helped me remember what change looks like." She turned toward the view. "Sometimes I think about that night at the station, how small the decision was. You could have walked away. I probably wouldn't remember your face." He studied her in the glow of the city lights. "But I didn't walk away, and now I can't imagine the world without you in it." Her breath caught. "Evan." He stepped closer, careful not to rush the moment. "I'm not saying this to make things harder. I just need you to know that what I feel, it's real. You and Sophie, you're the reason I stopped living in the past." Her eyes shimmered. "And you're the reason I started believing in the future." He smiled, barely whispering. "Then maybe we're saving each other." For a heartbeat, the air between them stilled. Then she reached up, her fingers brushing his cheek. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a quiet acknowledgement of everything they'd built from fear and hope and second chances. Inside, Sophie called sleepily, "Mom? Evan? The light's still shining." They both laughed, stepping inside. Sophie was already tucked in, the sun-shaped nightlight casting a soft halo across her face. The brass pendant hung beside it, reflecting the glow. Emily pulled the blanket higher. "Sweet dreams, sunshine." Sophie yawned. "You'll both be here when I wake up, right?" Evan nodded, smiling. "Count on it." Within minutes, she was asleep, her hand resting on the edge of the bed where the light pooled warm across her fingers. Emily lingered at the doorway, watching her daughter breathe evenly. She hasn't slept this peacefully since before her father left. Evan glanced at the pendant, at the steady glow on the wall. She knows she's safe now. Emily turned toward him, her voice barely above a whisper. "And so do I." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the rhythm of Sophie's breathing, the distant hum of the city, the quiet pulse of new beginnings. Evan slipped his hand into his pocket and felt the folded crayon drawing. 3 figures under a blazing sun, the words, "Our Light," scrawled across the top. He looked at Emily. "You ever think maybe some lights aren't meant to fade?" She smiled. "Only the ones worth keeping." He took her hand gently. "Then, let's keep this one." Outside, the city buzzed and shimmered, but inside that small apartment, time felt still, like the moment itself was holding its breath, content just to glow. And as the golden nightlight flickered across Sophie's face, Evan realized that every choice, every step, every storm had led him right here, to the kind of family you don't find, but recognize. A family built not by blood, but by courage, by love that arrived quietly and refused to leave, by the simple promise of a light that would never go out.